Hello, fellow rebel capitalists. I hope you're well. I think part of my job, or what I see as my objective on YouTube and social media, is to connect a lot of the dots for you guys so you can start thinking these or using these thought experiments, thinking this stuff through, and come to your own conclusions on what the probabilities are that the future of the world and the United States and the Western economies is, what the future looks like from a standpoint of, do we see more free market capitalism? Do we see less? Do we see a move towards socialism, communism, Marxism, whatever you want to call it? So that's what I'm going to do in this video right now. I'm going to connect some dots for you guys. We're going to start off by going over a quick clip from a YouTube video for my good buddy Emil Kalinowski and Jeff Snyder. Their show is called Making Sense. This is when they were talking about late stage capitalism. It's a core principle for the Marxist ideology. It's end stage capitalism or late stage capitalism. And this is basically when the industrial, the capitalists, back then it was the Industrial Revolution, when that takes hold and that creates as much prosperity as it possibly can, then it's up to the socialists, the revolutionaries, to take over. And their conclusion was not that communism didn't work. Their conclusion is that they didn't allow capitalism to take hold. They started the communist revolution or Marxist socialist revolution too early. And if they would have just allowed the Industrial Revolution to continue to play out in Russia prior to taking over the means of production, they would have been successful. So oddly enough, this is right around the time when China started to open up and become more of a, we'll call it a capitalist society with air quotes. And we saw more private property, and that's when we saw this economic boom in China. But more recently, we have seen them go the complete opposite direction, with them trying to create all of these restrictions on companies, such as their version of Uber, on Alibaba. And now if they let Evergrande go bust, it's kind of ironic because they might let Evergrande go bust just to send a message to the other capitalists. So they're using free market capitalism as Schumpeter's creative destruction to send a message to the capitalists to remind them that the Communist Party is still in charge, and they may be moving China more toward the direction of this socialist utopia, or what they believe is a socialist utopia, where they are taking over, the government is taking over the means of production. So the workers can, improve their standard of living. That's basically the way their vision works. So, and this plays directly into the Evergrande story. So I wanted to highlight this and connect the dots for you, like I was saying at the beginning of this video. So let's start by going over this clip from this episode of Making Sense. It was episode 17.
Thought that developed in the 19th century, philosophical movement that Marx and Engels are definitely a part of, that believed that humanity itself would evolve along with technology. And so the fact that humans were incapable of achieving utopia before the pre-Enlightenment humans couldn't do it beforehand, that simply meant that humanity needed to evolve along with technology. That once human beings had evolved, they would then be capable of achieving the socialist dream and the socialist revolution, so long as they kept in accordance with what Marx said. And the irony of communism in the 20th century is that it took root in all the wrong places, including Russia. What Marx said was the West needed to do it first. The wealthy societies need to transition first so that there would be enough wealth and technology to support the utopia. Instead, what happened is you had these communist revolutions like Russia in 1917 in pre-industrial societies, which created all sorts of problems. In fact, Karl Marx would have abhorred he would have been absolutely upset and apoplectic about the Russian Revolution, because the Russian economy was not ready for the socialist transition. And in fact, the Bolshevik and Menshevik leaders who took over in the Soviet Union agreed. They realized they were jumping the gun. They knew that they were doing it, but what happened was that World War I had presented them with a unique opportunity that they couldn't let go to waste.
Okay. So I want to point out what Jeff just said. He articulated what I was trying to say a lot better than I did, with describing kind of how they see late stage capitalism, and how Marx viewed the technological advances that they were seeing in the West needed to take hold. Then they needed to implement socialism in the West, and that would be kind of the model before they implemented it in areas that were behind the curve as far as technology such as Russia. But that World War I presented the Bolsheviks, the Marxists, with an opportunity that they couldn't refuse to try to create this workers' paradise, this socialist utopia. So what does that have to do with 2020, 2021, and the cerveza sickness? Well, if we look at what the global elite and the central planners are saying today, and if we also look at their actions, going back to China, what are they doing? They are taking a more heavy-handed approach to their private industry, whether it's coming down with more and more regulations, or whether it's potentially allowing Evergrande to fail to really send a message to all the other corporations within China. But if we look at the global elite and the central planners, more specifically Klaus Schwab with the World Economic Forum, we see that their language is identical to the Bolshevik language that Jeff Snyder points out from World War I. Let me give you an example. Right here we have, and this is from the World Economic Forum, this is Klaus Schwab's post. The URL is now is the time for a great reset. And they usually, oh boy, with this one, they didn't change the title. Okay, so the title here that you can look up on your own, so you can fact check me. Now is the time for a great reset. But we go down here and we've got a quote from Mr. Schwab himself. The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. Well, if you look into the core philosophy or the objectives of the Great Reset agenda, it means more and more central planning. And more central planning is right in line with the Marxist philosophy that the Bolsheviks had back in World War I. But it doesn't stop with Klaus. It also, we see this echoed with the useful idiots. And useful idiot number one is Justin Trudeau. And we can hear him right here in a speech that he gave back in 2020, echoing the same exact message that we heard from Klaus and the exact same message we heard from the Bolsheviks in World War I. Here we go.
Strong, coordinated response across the world and across sectors is essential. This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance.
So there you go. You got Justin Trudeau saying this pandemic has presented us an opportunity for a reset. And we go back to Schwab's quote, the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity for a reset. You see, and this is why I believe that Trudeau, Biden, they're all just puppets for the global elite. And maybe it's the IMF, maybe it's the World Economic Forum, maybe it's other individuals, I don't know. But when they're all saying the exact same thing, not just the same concepts, they're using the exact same language, it makes you kind of scratch your head and say, well, just using common sense, there's probably a connection there. But the main point is what Jeff mentioned, is that back in World War I, the Bolsheviks saw that as an opportunity to push their agenda through. And I think it's the exact same thing we are seeing today with the global elite, the central planners. They are using the cerveza sickness as an opportunity to push through their Marxist agenda.